Hello everybody, welcome back.
Hello, welcome back to Getting That Medical Degree. And today's topic is another MCAT series. What are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, so we're still in the biology section. We have a few more chapters left after this one. This is the digestive system. I think's pretty easy to understand. Some tricks to it, but we'll get through those. So the overview of the digestion system, you have intracellular, so it's kind of like inside the cells, mean by the word. So this is like oxidation, glucose, and using fatty acids to make energy. So this is what's happening like inside the cells. Extracellular is kind of how you get that nutrients from food. Mechanical is how you break food down into smaller particles so it can be absorbed better. And then chemical is kind of like what happens like to the chemical bonds, the proteins. And then you have peristalsis. So this is basically the contraction of the gut, which is increased by the PNS. So if flight's going down, which is sympathetic system, the system's going to be slowed down. But when you're resting, which is also the rest of digestion, the peripheral nervous system is going to be picking up, or the PNS. So the digestive pathway is pretty simple. You have the oral cavity, eat food, goes to the pharynx, larynx, stomach. From the stomach goes small intestine, large intestine, then rectum. So we'll get into more details on these. So the oral cavity, or your mouth, is where mastification starts. So that's where you're chewing your food up. You also have two enzymes in your mouth, so amylase and lipase. And this starts the chemical digestion of the food. And when food is like chewed up, it's called a bolus, and then it's swallowed. So that's your mouth. So your pharynx connects the mouth to the esophagus. The epiglottis actually prevents the food from entering the larynx. The larynx is your voice box, so you don't want your food going into your voice box. That'd be bad. So that's what the epiglottis prevents. Then the esophagus, which is kind of interesting, it propels the food to the stomach using peristalsis. So the top third of the esophagus is skeletal muscle, and that's somatic control. So you kind of have some control over that. The middle is a combination of both, so skeletal and smooth muscle, and that's your autonomic control, which means you really have no control over that at all. It's automatic. And the bottom of it is smooth muscle, and that's autonomic as well. So it's interesting to know the different types of muscles in the esophagus. Because they could ask you questions about, oh, there's something in the esophagus. What type of cells are in the esophagus? Like point to a part of the esophagus or something. If you talk about skeletal muscles, you could talk about a lot more about the cells. Talk about smooth, you could talk about nucleation, stuff like that. So like they could like pick stuff like that from just talking about esophagus. So your stomach. So the stomach has a pH of 2, which is very acidic. On the next slide, we'll actually show you like the acidic scale and like what common things are each pH. So there's four parts: the fundus, body, antrum, and the pylorus. Again, there's a thing there called pepsin, and that breaks down proteins. So you might be thinking, okay, if your stomach's so like acidic, why doesn't it eat itself? Because that's what acid does; it eats through things. So you have these things called mucus cells. They create bicarbonate-rich mucus. So bicarbonate is a base, so it kind of protects the stomach walls from acid. So that's why your stomach doesn't really like, I don't know, eat through itself, and then you have no stomach because pH 2 is very acidic. Then you have chief cells, which secrete a pepsinogen, which is activated by the acidic environment. Parietal cells just secrete HCl and intrinsic factor, so intrinsic factor is needed for B12 absorption. Just something to know. G cells, they secrete gastrin, so GG. That's an easy way to remember that. And this increases the HCl secretion and gastric motility. So G cells secrete gastrin, which causes more HCl to be secreted, which is from the parietal cells. And then you have mucus cells making bicarbonate-rich environment, so you don't eat your stomach up. So after the food goes through the stomach, the food particles are now called chyme, and that exits through the pyloric sphincter into the duodenum. But next slide is just a simple slide showing you like acidity. So seven's neutral. When you go higher up the scale, it becomes more basic, and going down is acidic. So as I said before, the stomach acid is a 2, so that's like vinegar. The only thing less than like that is battery acid, which is crazy. So your stomach's almost like battery acid. Like that's insane. And hydrochloric acid they use in like chemistry lab, that's a 3. So your stomach's more like acidic than hydrochloric acid that you're using like in your labs. Tomato juice, black coffee. You don't need any of these. Pure water 7, so that's one thing you need to know here. And like drain cleaner is really basic, so let's go 14. Just want to show like the comparison of the pHs and stuff that you might know of, or like common things you use in your life. Anyways, you have hormones that are called feeding hormones. So ADH and aldosterone are pretty important in the kidney, and they increase your thirst. Glucagon and ghrelin increase your hunger. Leptin and CCK increase satiety. This means you ate a lot of food, you're not feeling hungry. That's because of leptin and CCK, or cholecystokinin. So people could have maybe a disorder where they don't have as much CCK being released or something. I don't know if this exists, probably does. And then they'd be eating a lot more because they're not feeling like they're full. So something to think about. They could ask questions about that, like, oh, what happens if this hormone has a mutation and it doesn't makes it not work as much? So that's how the Mcat will ask you that. And the duodenum, so this is the first part of the small intestine. So it has a basic pH of 8.5. That's where a lot of the chemical digestion occurs. So disaccharides. So saccharides and stuff like that's like a carbohydrate sugar. So this like breaks down sugars. So breaking down sugars to disaccharides. Aminopeptidase breaks down peptides. Enteropeptidase, basically the same thing. You have some hormones as well. So you have the secretin hormone, which simulates the release of pancreatic juices and slow down motility. This also helps with like bicarbonate, so it helps like a bit more of a bicarbonate buffer get in there as well. And CCK stimulates the bile release from the gallbladder, and then release of pancreatic juices and satiety. Again, they could just ask you about. Again, they like asking stuff about what happens if this doesn't work. If this hormone doesn't work, what's going to happen? So, something to think about. Absorption and defecation, duodenum and ileum, small intestine, absorption. Small intestine has villi, and then those are covered with microvilli. So you have these capillary beds, absorbs water and nutrients, and then they have more on top of them, so that increases the surface area so they can absorb a lot. Basically, more of something small means more surface area, which is something to keep in mind. Absorb water soluble nutrients, and if it's like fat soluble, it goes into the lacteal system, which is part of the lymphatic system. So vitamin absorption is fat soluble, and these are your CADEs, and they enter the lacteal. So KADE, CADE, lacteal system. Water soluble, this goes into plasma directly. So now you're in the large intestine, so we're just working down the body. There's water and salts form feces. The colon has different structures, so it goes ascending, transverse, descending, sigmoid. Then you have gut bacteria. So the gut bacteria is pretty important. It produces vitamin K and biotin. So why is vitamin K important in your body, Mitchell?
Vitamin K.
Uh-huh.
I do not know.
Okay. So this slide right here looks very complex. The slide after that one. So this is
So there is a little understatement.
this is more about the heart than anything, but vitamin K is really important. So vitamin K is involved in clotting. So 1972, so 10, 9, 7, and 2 is the clotting factors in the body that are dependent on vitamin K. So if you have a lot of vitamin K, you're going to have more clotting, which means you're going to be having blood clots. If you don't have much vitamin K, you're going to be bleeding. So very balanced system there, and if you change your diet, it's going to affect your bleeding. As you see on the screen, there's a lot of drugs here. So warfarin inhibits 9, 10, perthrombin 2, and 8. Where factor XA inhibitors inhibit just 10A. Same with heparin. Heparin also in thrombin, and then you have direct thrombin inhibitors. This kind of shows you how much the body is involved. So we're talking about the intestine here, producing vitamin K. And that just throw you into the cardiovascular system with clots. just how much the bodies all connect to each other really easily, and how you should be thinking about on like tests and really just in general to try to form the bigger picture. So again, MCAT's not going to ask about the clotting pathway. This is more for pharmacy, medical school in general, but 1972 is the vitamin K dependent clotting factor. So that's important to know for medical school. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, back to what we're learning about for the MCAT. You have accessory organs, so it's the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder. So the pancreas acinar cells, they produce pancreatic juices that bicarbonate, amylase, peptidases, lipases. So it breaking that apart, it breaks down proteins, breaks down fats, and it produces a buffer basically. Liver makes the bile, albumin, and clotting factors. So we talked about that recently. They process nutrients, they detox NH3 to urea, as well as alcohol and drugs. So hepatic absorption of drugs is something you don't see too often, but it is something that keep in mind that drugs do get absorbed hepatically, which means through the liver. Most drugs are absorbed through the kidney, which is why kidneys are really important, as we'll talk about. I think that's the next chapter is the kidney, so we'll talk about that there. We also have the gallbladder, so stores and concentrates bile. CCK stimulates the bile release, so there's also that. So getting into a couple questions here. What does a mucus cell do? It produces bicarbonate-rich mucus, and that protects the cell wall from acids, so kind of important to know. The creatine, pancreatic juice, and motility. And what stimulates bile to be released from the gallbladder? That's CCK. That's also involved with your satiety. That's it, guys, for the digestion system. I hope you guys learned something new.
Thank you guys.
I am so sad.